Well, greetings. This is David Kong. I'm one of the principals of DEI Advisors. Today, we are delighted to have Monika Nerger, the global CIO of Mandarin Oriental, on our show. Monika sits on several advisory boards of our industry and is an inductee to the International Hospitality Technology Hall of Fame. Well, welcome to the show, Monika.
Thank you, David. It's so good to be here. And thank you for everyone who is listening and those of you who may watch this afterwards. I have to say, I think what you're doing with the team at DEI Advisors is so important to where we are. And I wish that as a younger woman, I had something like DEI Advisors to go to, help build a little bit of confidence and understand how to develop my career.
Well, thanks for saying that, Monika. Monika, it's unusual to see a female in an executive leadership position in technology for a major hotel company. Can you share your career journey with us?
I can try and keep it short. Um, like a lot of us who entered the industry at a specific time, it was a bit happenstance. I would say that my parents would tell you that I had wanderlust, and this was the perfect opportunity to start a career and see the world. And I started in food and beverage. I did everything tableside service. I filleted fish not well for our guests. I was an aspirational sommelier. I was a bartender. I had a chance then to work first in Toronto, and then I moved to Sardinia and then over to the UK. And when I came back to Canada, Pan Pacific Hotels had opened in Vancouver, just about to. And they gave me a chance to work on their marketing database. So now I thought, I know everything there is to know about tech. I had an Apple Macintosh and I used a Wang word processor, so I must be in IT, but I obviously was not. And I was so disappointed because they hired an IT director. And I thought, what do I need to do? And one day, I must tell you, I just knocked on his door and I said, you need me and I want to work in IT. And a little bit of negotiation moved over from marketing to technology. And that was the first door that opened for me. Now, my best friend and mentor for life, patience of the saint. What's the difference between an A drive and a C drive? For those of you who remember what that was, and taught me so much. And through Pan Pacific, that was the first time I got to travel to Hong Kong and Singapore, Jakarta. And I was so excited to see the Far East, as we would have referred it to at the time. And next thing that came along the path, completely unexpectedly, I was on a ferry going to Vancouver Island, and I saw a little ad for a position on a cruise line, and more on a lark than anything. I did a handwritten letter, mailed it in, never expected to hear back. A few months later, I got a call from Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. I couldn't believe it. And they sent me a ticket to fly to Miami and put me on a ship. And I started implementing some shipboard technologies. Got to see the world. I traversed once round. I was on so many different itineraries, and it was such an incredible experience. And in order to progress my career, I knew I needed even more education. That's where the MBA program came in. I went back to school. I thought, okay, now what? And as you know yourself, once you've done a little bit of higher education, you feel that you owe it to yourself to try something new, which is when you and I met at KPMG. So once I graduated, I left Royal Caribbean, came to join KPMG. I was very fortunate to do some work together and then continued on. I did some consulting work for a boutique company up in Seattle, and they did application modernization. And that sent me all over the casino and gaming industry, everywhere from Atlantic City, Las Vegas to Macau. And through people that I met in the industry, I made yet another connection, and that was with Mandarin Oriental. So that's sort of the long story of many different journeys. It looks like one nice, neat travel plan, but it was certainly not.
Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, you're just lucky to go work for Mandarin Oriental as a global CIO. They don't know that you've actually paid your dues along the way. You have such wonderful exposure and global perspective because of all the experiences you get up to that point. Well, congratulations on having made it to CIO and having been there for quite a while now, right?
Quite some time. Well, I began as vice president of technology for the Americas. I think there were big ambitions to grow the luxury brand in this region, and during that time, the then CEO asked me if I was willing to succeed him. I thought, oh my gosh, I could never do this. I could never stand in his shoes. He was well known, and still is, Nick Price, in our industry. And he was the one that gave me the chance, as well as the CEO, of course, who saw me, I'm sure, as a deer caught in the headlights when I first started.
Well, congratulations, you've made it, and you've done so well in your role. Congratulations to you.
Thank
Now
you.
let's talk about education. You alluded to the fact that you have an MBA. Actually, you have an undergrad in computer science as well. How important is formal education?
I really believe it depends on what you are pursuing or what you want to do. And I'll make a few comments here. First of all, I think that technology is quickly outpacing education. No doubt about it. Anything that I would have learned during my days in computer science is probably not very applicable today, but it gave a foundation. And I always encourage people to get the foundational education that they can. But here's where I have some really strong feelings about democratization of education, because I think that everybody should have a chance to get a good quality education, which is not to be dismissive of any of the formality of the programs or the great schools that we have in the United States, but I think more people deserve chances to and ability and affordability to have the same level. So getting back to technology and the importance of an education, there are many, many entry points in. You can get a certificate in cybersecurity, a couple of courses, and we will gladly hire you and continue to develop your career, which will be good paying and give you many opportunities. So no, I don't think it is necessary, but I just think it's part of the story, depending on what you might like to do in the future.
Yeah, I really like what you said. We had a couple of guests on our show previously that talked about the importance of formal education, how that broadened their horizon, allowed them to set up networks, and all that is really wonderful. But it's not for everyone, and we're all born differently, and there are different things that we can do to enrich ourselves. Doesn't necessarily need to be formal education. But I really agree with you, everything that you just said. No doubt you've had a very successful career, but there were challenges along the way. And I'm just curious as to what's your general approach to challenges.
It's a good question. I think we all face challenges, and they could be, losing a loved one. It could be something difficult, a new job that you've taken on. It could be an athletic pursuit. For me, it was running my first marathon. There are different challenges. And at the end of the day, I think you need to draw from your experience. So I'll give you an example at Mandarin Oriental. We had a cybersecurity attack in 2015. And it was probably one of the worst things that I have experienced. And you can say that you draw on what you know, but nothing is like a new challenge. But I think it's consistent in how you approach it, which is seek help. Go to your trusted friends, advisors. Don't think you have to do it alone. Ask for support. And then communicate, communicate, communicate. Cannot overemphasize how important that is to explain what's going on and where you are. And then during the pandemic, I coined a new term. I call it calmxiety. And I know that sounds a bit like an oxymoron, but really what that is, you're a leader of your team. Of course, everyone's terrified, everyone's worried. You need to find the center, draw on some of those experiences, make sure you keep that calm, even while you're battling with your own internal, trying to quell those very same fears. So I could tell you many different stories. Another challenge was taking on the CIO role. Did you see? I almost said CEO. CIO
It's a
role.
mixed up.
um, because the former CIO was so well respected, and the team was then about 125. So if we had all the colleagues at the hotels and corporate, and they were all men. We didn't have any women leaders. We had some administrative support, executive support, but my first thought is, how am I going to lead? And how will this team trust me and follow me? And through that, I learned quite a bit as well around spending a lot of time with people, FaceTime, listening, really listening to their concerns, and the cultural nuances and differences. First time I went to Hong Kong, brought the whole team together. I walk in a room, everyone is silent. And no matter what I said, I couldn't get any feedback or reaction. Of course, very different in the Western world.
Yeah, no doubt. And I can just envision myself in your shoes being a woman, being the only woman in the whole organization that's made up of men. That's a daunting challenge. And they and I mean obviously there were some doubts about you
Oh,
being
no,
female.
I am certain the things that I did not hear reflected reflected all of those concerns. And also, reestablishing yourself as someone who is, a step below. Now you have peers at the executive level, and are you up to the task? I also must say I had no idea what it was like to work for a CEO and how you have to change your approach, and the kind of information that a CEO needs is very different than what you would normally share with your team.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thanks for sharing your experiences and how you approach challenges. Sounds like it's having the calm center. And because if you're calm as a leader, everyone around you would feel much better about the situation, and doing a lot of listening. I like that. And asking for help. I like that too. Well, thanks for sharing that. Related to challenges, setbacks, and disappointments, obviously, we've all experienced that. And would you mind to share some of the lessons that you've learned?
I have a large pool to draw from. I think anyone that achieves some success in their lives has faced a number of setbacks and disappointments, and there were positions that I didn't get, and even recently, there was a board position I was very excited about. There were two of us, and the other person ended up getting the position. And I think what I learned is it's always important when you have a disappointment or a setback that you ask for feedback, but feedback that is actionable. And I'll give you an example of the difference. If you go to someone, you're disappointed you didn't get the job, and they say you weren't a good fit, that's not feedback, because it's not actionable, because you don't know what it means. So you have to probe a bit further. If they say you were not able to communicate or articulate effectively to the board the marketing strategy for China, which is their growth market. Now that's very specific. Now you can go back. Now you can really take it and understand, well, what do I need to do differently? And most importantly, then you go try again. And I think that's another takeaway of disappointment or failure or setback is just encouragement for you to learn more. And I'm always humbled by the things that I thought I knew, and I had so much more to learn.
Well, I like what you said. None of us is perfect, and we all have opportunities to learn. And when you can learn from those setbacks and disappointments, it makes you better. And also, I like the point that you're making that it makes you a better leader because then you can help
Absolutely.
others overcome their setbacks and disappointments. I like that. Let's talk about leadership qualities. I know you interview a lot of executive candidates, and what are some of the qualities that you try to assess?
Well, first of all, we're a people industry. And what I'm looking for is someone who really has that passion and understands that we serve a lot of different stakeholders, our customers, our colleagues, our owners, operators, our community. And I think to be successful as a leader in the industry, you have to find joy in the service of others. So that's what I'm looking for, and I cannot overemphasize that joy. Serving others in all of these different arenas. Also, for Mandarin Oriental, because we're in 23 different countries, I always think it's valuable to have another language or some experience having lived somewhere else. Um, Most definitely, I look for empathy. And I expect my leaders, even if they haven't necessarily worked in operations, that they're able to relate to the industry. An example would be understanding how difficult some of these jobs are, whether it's housekeeping, working in the kitchen, IT, engineering. You have to be empathetic to understand the role and the responsibility. We're here then, of course, to help direct that, set strategy, build beautiful hotels, but it's really the people that make the difference, and that's what I'm looking for.
That's really well said, and I totally agree with you. You've got to have empathy. You've got to find joy in serving others, and you've got to have a global perspective if you want to work for a global company like Mandarin Oriental. That's really well said. Thank you. Now, one of my favorite questions when I do interview people is to ask about their leadership style. What's your leadership style?
I hope that if any of my colleagues are watching this this will resonate as true. Um, so, based on what I've just shared with you, you can probably tell that I'm a people first leader, and I feel that I'm here to support them in their career development, not just within Mandarin Oriental, but also in their personal ambitions. And the way I like to lead is, of course, work with my team, set the strategy, set direction, and then leave it to them to work through how to deliver that. And because I think that level of autonomy is what people seek as they develop their careers, and it helps them grow, and we get better results.
Mhm.
So, those are probably the two pieces. The last I would say is really just leading with your values. And for me, that's about compassion, trust, and respect.
That's really well said, and I think in most textbooks that would be the desired qualities that any leader should aspire to have. Having empathy for others, wanting to serve them and enable them to be successful and being empowering. That's really well said. Thank you.
Textbook versus execution, so different.
No, I know you, and I think you are that kind of a leader. Thank you. Now, Mandarin Oriental is a global hotel company. They have hotels in 20 some countries. You do a lot of traveling abroad. How do you manage the work life balance?
Good question again. Probably one of the most important things you can ask me, because I hope this helps others in our conversation. I used to travel a lot more than I have in pandemic times. So it was some 200 days of the year, which is
Wow.
tremendous amount of travel. Managing work-life balance is something we all talk about, but nobody really knows how to. What's the secret? What's the right algorithm to achieve that? Right now, I am working primarily West Coast US with our Hong Kong team, the UK team, Middle East. So I have what I will consider jet lag in place. I am taking calls at 3 a.m., at midnight, at 5 o'clock at night, 10 p.m. It's a very fluid time as we work hard to turn the company around through this very difficult period. And we have colleagues, as you say, in 23 different countries. So what I do is little pieces, call it the power of one. I'll do a 1 hour nap, running 1 mile. I'll read one chapter. At least try to do these things for yourself. And everyone is perfectly capable of doing that. It's hard to practice until you get some rhythm and say, all right, it's time to step away from digital for a moment and do that 15-minute walk. To me, there are some non-negotiables. I think part of work-life balance is saying, these are my guardrails. These are things that I will not negotiate. For me, every day I call my mom and dad, 5 p.m. Eastern. But if I'm in a meeting, I step out, and that's a non-negotiable. A date night with my husband, non-negotiable. So I just think you have to have those small things in your life, easier said than done, that you can bring into what is a very stressful time, particularly in IT, where we see the demand on digital, as you know, during the pandemic, immense. Higher risk in cybersecurity, fewer resources. There's a lot to manage, and it's important to take the time and take care of yourself first.
Yeah, I like that very much. You've got to take the time to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you can't be effective at your role. And I also
No.
like keeping some things sacred, that those things are non-negotiable, because those things keep you sane so you can be effective.
Did,
Very well said.
did you
Thank you.
have a non-negotiable?
Well, like you, I like to keep some time to myself. Like I like to exercise to make sure I'm in a proper frame of mind. And, I make time to exercise. I get up earlier so I can exercise. So those things are
Right.
non-negotiable. And family always comes first. I
Definitely.
always advocate that as well. Let's talk about some 20 years ago when we worked together. I was fortunate to work with you at KPMG. I really enjoyed that time with you. And fast forward to now, we've all come a long way. Looking back, what's the advice that you would give to your younger self?
Well, first of all, I will say, how lucky was I to be assigned to your team and have the chance to work with you. And it was on the Best Western opportunity, as you remember. And I learned so much in a short period of time. I would say, advice to younger self, and does anybody really like that question? Because, uh, I would love a mulligan. But advice to younger self, just be braver, be bolder, and be true to yourself, and trust your instincts. And particularly when you're younger, maybe you don't have as good a sense, but you always know. You just don't get really good at trusting the instincts until you've had a little bit of experience.
It's really well said. And I interview a lot of people in my previous role. And the one thing that always struck me was how they thought about themselves, that they shortchange themselves. A lot of times people shortchange themselves in the way they think about their future. So I like what you just said about being bold and how you envision yourself in the future. Now, let's talk about challenges that women and other underrepresented groups face in our industry. Our industry has come a long way, and I'm really gratified to see that a lot of major hotel companies like Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, actually all have wonderful programs now to
Hmm.
improve the hiring and development and promotion of diverse talent. That's really gratifying to see. But why are women and other underrepresented groups still face such challenges in moving ahead?
Well, I think that what you're doing with DEI advisors and some of the programs you just mentioned is a recognition of a big problem because we haven't been doing this very long. And I call it the 3 Ps, which is really pipeline, priorities, and possibilities. So the pipeline, even we're starting now to a large degree. We're doing a better job of hiring with less bias, casting a wider net, helping others. That when I mentioned that whole democratization of education, to get somebody in the pipeline, they have to have a starting point that is reasonable and affordable, and need to be encouraged as well. So I think start with the pipeline. The priorities. Wow, I could say a lot here because I don't think that we have always walked that talk at all. And every time you give a small piece of encouragement to someone, it could be at work, it could be in your community, it could be anyone that you meet, you are helping them think about their future in a bigger way than maybe they would have imagined. And maybe that was your experience. It certainly was mine. I didn't have that sense of priority. I thought this is what I am. This is probably what I can achieve. I didn't think that I had a big future career potential ahead of me. So prioritizing that as leaders and influencers in the industry is critical. And then the last gets back to the whole notion of possibility. So what is possible? What can we do? And it's not enough to help build the pipeline. It's not enough to prioritize what you do. It's offering those chances to people who you might not have considered for a role, or someone that comes from a different country and is starting out, and you might be concerned, can the person do the job? Give them a chance. So I would say those things: pipeline, priorities, possibilities.
I like that, the 3 Ps. It's easier
Yep.
to remember, and we should keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about the advice on finding mentors, champions, and advocates, because we all know how important that is, because on your own, you can only do so much to advance your career. We've got to have mentors that point out our blind side, and we got to have champions and advocates to help us move up the ladder. What's your advice on finding mentors, champions, and advocates?
Well, it starts with you. It starts with the individual. You have to raise your hand. I would suggest, doing a little more than what's asked. Being willing to explore and try something new, even though you might fail. And along that journey, you're going to find people that want to help you. And don't be, as I said earlier, don't be afraid to ask for it. It doesn't need necessarily to be a formal mentoring program. You develop these relationships and contacts by trying new things, and those doors will open. And there's different ways to experience and learn things without having to spend a lot of money. I was listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he interviewed a gentleman named Rolf Potts, who wrote The Vagabond Traveler. And just a little thing clicked. I thought that's pretty cool. And what Rolf suggested is go to a hostel in your community, sit down, and say, what are you doing here? Why did you come to my city? Where are you going next? What technology did you use to figure out how to travel? And you you can find mentors, champions, and relationships everywhere. I know it's very easy to sit behind a screen. And sometimes, as we are doing now, that is actually something I'm more comfortable with. But if you give yourself the chance to go out into the community and talk to people, even in a small way, you're going to end up building a network that's both digital and analog. And combined, that's the power of how you move forward. Maybe the last thing I'll say on that, I draw from my husband who's a musician, and every night he's on stage, he's out there, and he always says to me, "You never know who's in the room." And it just might be that one observation that someone says, "Uh-huh, I remember this person," or "I remember this experience, and I'd like to connect and do more together."
Well, that's powerful. I like it. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I see that we're running low on time, so I just
Ah,
ask you a couple more questions. I can talk to you forever, but we have to stick with our time frame. So the next question is about finding inspiration and passion. I've known you for a while, and I know you are a highly dedicated and passionate person. You give it all anytime you take on a role. And is that passion innate in you? How do you find inspiration?
really quickly. And something, I've noticed on your program, part of it is innate for me for certain, and that comes from an immigrant background where my mother and father were children during World War II in Germany,
Mm.
and my father's house was burned to the ground. My mother's father was killed. They came to Canada. They didn't know each other, and they began with nothing. And I know you can relate to this. No money, didn't speak the language, needed to start their lives over, and that was so foundational to me in developing that passion and drive and desire to succeed. But I also do believe it can be cultivated, and that gets back to my musician husband. So if you find something that you love and you're really passionate, he told me early on when I was earning no money, he said, "Do what you love, the money will follow." So you have to go all in. You have to do the work. But I do believe it can be cultivated as well.
Yeah, no, I like that. As immigrants, we know firsthand we've got to try harder. It's up to us to make it, and also like what your husband said, you got to give it all. Thank you. Now our show is about self-empowerment. Is there a parting advice that you can share with us?
Just yeah, there was one thing, other than what I've talked about, being brave, being bold, true to yourself, staying humble. Just a tidbit and takeaway for those who have time. My favorite author is David Foster Wallace, and if you have just a few minutes, find his commencement speech called "This is Water,"
This is
and
what.
this is water. And to me, it changed my life. It changed the way I think about things. It changed the way I think about people. And I would encourage you to listen to it even just once. That's my piece of advice.
Thank you. I'm gonna go look it up. This is water.
Oh, this is
Thanks
water.
for
It's on
sharing.
YouTube. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. You'll love it.
Can't wait to get my hands on that. Well, thank you, Monica. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. I appreciate your being on the show. I've always admired you, and I'm so impressed with what you have accomplished. Thank you for
David,
taking the time to be on the show.
likewise. Likewise. Thank you so much. It's a real honor and a privilege, and thank you for giving me the chance to share some of this with the listening audience.
I'm sure the audience appreciates your comments. And thank you to the audience also for tuning in. And if you like this interview, please visit us on our website, deiadvisors.org. We hope to see you there. Thanks again, Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you.